You begin to realise how old you are when someone says to you, I think you're the only person in the group that was here when this all started. And I thought, So I've been given the task today of setting the context for your day today by looking at what's been happening with outdoor learning, sustainability and play over the last 20 years. We're not going to be here for a long time, so I will be doing this very quickly. When I was asked to do this, I started to look on my bookshelves to see what publications had appeared since that time. And this is only a small selection of them because I lent other ones to a master's student last year. But I was quite surprised, and sometimes it's really good to go back and revisit these things. So after the Rio Summit in 1992, there was quite a lot of action around the world, but particularly in Scotland. We had a working group called Learning for Life. And as a result of that, we actually have a Scottish strategy for environmental education that was published in 1995. So you may wish to have a look at this later. The important ones recently that I've picked out here are the outdoor learning, curriculum for excellence through outdoor learning, Teaching Scotland's Future, the outdoor learning associated publications that have come along, and the ones to do with sustainable development, particularly the most recent one, the One Planet Schools report. And just at the edge there, I've just put in the consultation for play, and I put this presentation together at the beginning of last week, and it just shows you how quickly things change because, of course, our national strategy, play strategy for Scotland was published last Friday, was it? So we're really very well positioned now with lots of permissions to be doing these things. But I'm going to go back to show you just how the Sharing Good Practice programme has been working alongside all these policy changes in Scotland. And as far as the one for teacher educators was concerned, this started around about 1998. I was teaching at the time on Isla, part-time, and also working for SNH as their education officer, and trying to get teachers to use the outdoors on Isla more. And I began to become very interested in what actually motivated people to do it. They were surrounded by this wonderful environment in Isla, but they didn't seem to want to get out there and enjoy it. And so I started to look around at courses that were offered for teachers that actually took them outdoors and got them immersed in the natural world. And I was very fortunate to go across to the Yukon in Canada and work alongside an amazing man called Bob Jickling, who was running courses for teachers from all over Canada at that time, and it involved taking them out on journeys. And on these journeys, they were keeping creative journals, they were meeting up with scientists to help them with research, so looking at wolf dens, for example. But they were also reading educational papers and having outdoor seminars. And it wasn't just teachers, there were people from other disciplines were there. And there were social workers and librarians. And frankly, it just blew my mind because in Scotland at that time, there really was nothing like that. So I came back to Scotland and thought, this is the way forward. We need to have training like this. But everywhere I went, I was stonewalled. Everyone said, no, we're not doing that, we're not doing that. And eventually, I wrote to Walter Humes, who was the Professor of Education at the University of Strathclyde, I think, at that time, and said, these are my ideas. Why is no one interested in them? This is part of the letter that he sent back to me. Schools at present are still run on the model of prisons, factories and asylums. And he said, my vision of education and the one for teacher educators was actually subversive. It's quite interesting because most of the teachers I was meeting in Canada were going through a master's programme. The kind of education that I was seeing there was curriculum for excellence. But Walter said, to get creative ideas on the agenda, you have to take risks. And this is where SNH came in because I came to the Sharing Good Practice team here, and there was a very visionary person leading the programme at that time called Lorna Brown. And I said, I would really like to get this person across here to talk to people because I think if people hear what he has to say, they will be very interested. I should say, I knew he had very divergent views because in his journal he said that. So we knew that he was going to be challenging people. And so Bob came across and was part of the first of the Sharing Good Practice programmes. The following year, they funded another person I'd met on this inspirational 4 months I'd had in Canada, David Orr, who I've been in contact with this week, and he's delighted that things have moved on as far as they have. And I can always remember, if you read any of his books, he just has these lovely little phrases. And this one at the bottom, you can have this fabulous sustainable building that's really energy efficient and have all those things in place. But if the people inside it don't think in that way, he claims it can't be sustainable. Great quote. So just to summarise some of the things very quickly that have happened over the last few years, and there have been many, and Scotland has led the way so often in these. We had the national debate and then Curriculum for Excellence. We had the Real World Learning Partnership coming together, 16 NGOs who lobbied really hard to get outdoor learning in the curriculum, and they're still there making sure that things are being implemented. We had a great research agenda, and that continues, and a group of us will be meeting after the conference today. Outdoor learning officers in post. We had very significant publications for sustainable development education published as part of Agenda 21, 10 years on at the Rio Summit. We had the publication Outdoor Learning, growing support for outdoor learning worldwide. I mean, it just goes on. And also, Education Scotland funded study tours to Norway, Sweden and Finland, and I was very fortunate to be part of one of those. So you can see that it's been a very quickly moving agenda in many ways, and we have so much in place and so much to be proud of in Scotland, I feel. And this was another example of SNH with the Sharing Good Practice programme really responding very quickly. I was very impressed by what I saw with the initial teacher education people at the University of Bodø when I was on my study tour. And so we had Anne Christensen came across to do a keynote presentation at the Sharing Good Practice programme in 2011. This is children out ice fishing and gutting fish, pre-fives, wonderful. But I'm going to go back a year because one of the most significant I feel Sharing Good Practice events that we had was in 2010, where we managed to get people away for 2 days, and there was an overnight there as well. And I firmly believe that kind of social setting where people start to maybe sit around a campfire or do things a little bit differently in their social time, that's where the interesting conversations take place. And we were able to share a lot in the 2 days. People were bringing along bits of their research, good practice that they had seen in schools and in other places. And at the end of that, we asked this group to take on a very important task. We knew that the Donaldson review, they were looking for, the consultation was there, and they were looking for people to comment on that. So what we did was we got that group to put in a response to that. And that was just brilliant because people were working towards something, and we were able to harness all that energy and enthusiasm in the room. It's a shame that the actual document at the end of the day is so dull looking, but the contents inside are very interesting. So what I'd like to do now is to set this within the context of what's important now, and that's getting teachers out there. We've identified all these things that are in place, but why is it that teachers are still reluctant to get out there? There's some support that they need to be able to do it. And I'm just going to illustrate a project that I'm working on just now called Stories in the Land. It's got a research element. I'm working with Greg Mannion from the University of Stirling on that. But despite the fact that it's a Heritage Lottery project, it's got lots of funding behind it, and we're offering a huge amount of support for teachers in the way of training, and it's linking indoor and outdoor learning, we didn't get a huge number of people signing up. The people who did have been absolutely brilliant, and I'm just going to show you a few images of these because I think you'll notice in here there are certain risky activities. For example, those children are sitting very close to a fire. We didn't have a guard round it, but the group just seemed to know. They were, you know, we'd said to them beforehand, and then we had an adult present, but we didn't have to really be very vigilant about it. As I said, it's an indoor and outdoor learning programme. We've had Sally Harkness write us a droving storyline, and the schools have worked with that in a number of different ways. This is Speenbridge Primary School. And the pupils have had storytellers telling them stories. They've been celebrating customs that are associated with droving and cattle. And the person at the Folk Museum said, "That's a brilliant picture. How did you manage to get that looking like that child was jumping over that fire?" And I said, "Because he was jumping over the fire." It's a peat fire that's got hardly anything in it at all. But the children really loved that, you know, the sort of excitement of jumping over a fire, as you can see from that young boy there. We've had them looking at plants and thinking about how the drovers would have lived off the land and what plants you can eat, making nettle tea, making bannocks, making fire in a number of different ways, these boys with a bow drill. And this is the children making butter and cooking the bannocks on the fire. And an important part of it has been working with the children to see if they can look at the landscape and begin to create their own stories. And this is what they're doing here with storyteller Claire Hewitt. We then arranged that we would go back to the schools about a month later, during which time the children had identified routes that they would like to take the storytellers on. Over in Badenoch, where we're working, this was done with a pony and cart, and we had a traditional storyteller, Essie Stewart, who's one of the travelling people and was a pearl fisher when she was younger, fascinating woman, and a Gaelic speaker. And her father was one of the most famous storytellers, Ali Dal. The first thing you notice here is we're taking the pony and cart into the school grounds. A lot of people might be a little bit hesitant about that, but we did the risk assessment, we felt fine about it. And this is the Gaelic Medium Unit upper stages that are meeting up with Bria, the pony. We had story walks in the evening, again with a pony and cart, where the children told their stories and the storytellers told their stories. We had a drovers camp, made bannocks. And there was a lot of play going on here. We had children going off into the forest, coming back saying, I've caught 100 deer and brought them back, you know. So all the adults just joined in with that role play. So there was a lot of really interesting learning going on. And the Kingussie pupils decided they wanted to take us up to the township rates, which was actually the main settlement before Kingussie. We had to take the pony a different route, but eventually met them at the top there. And I just think this is a lovely picture showing these people flowing through the landscape, the children's sweatshirts really shining out there, but the pony at the top there. And we did some storytelling and also recorded the children. This is at Alvey Primary School, being told a story by Claire before they start their stories and are recorded. And meanwhile, while this is going on, the pony is grazing in the school grounds. I just loved that, you know, the fact that we had this pony down there. Last Friday, and that's how recent it is, I was at Speen Bridge, where the children decided they'd like to take us on one of the most famous drove routes that was used by a man called John Cameron from Corryhoily. And he was one of the most famous drovers of all. His droves were 7 miles long, and one of the children in the class lives at the old farm that he used to live at. And so this is just on the drove route from the farm. We were imagining what it would look like to go up that drove route and be able to see cattle for as far as you could look. And as we were doing that, by surprise, a drover came over from Crieff and announced that he'd run out of bannocks, and he was looking for a stance. And so, of course, the children invited him back to the drovers' camp that we had set up. Now, if you're wondering what these funny little plastic things are hanging out of that child's legs, maybe you didn't notice that. What we were doing was, before we left school, the children had felt wrapped around their feet to make little boots, and then they walked. And so the little felt feet become a perfect impression of your journey, as well as a perfect impression of the feet. And the children said, well, I've done it as well. It's actually not as uncomfortable as you think. And they were able to put little strands of found wool into that as well. And these are going to be part, along with the recordings that we've made, part of an exhibition that will be at the Storytelling Centre in September. We've got 6 weeks of exhibition space, and the children will be doing a performance there, bilingual, along with the storytellers. So it's quite an exciting time for all these kids. And finally, I just want you to have a look at these 2 teachers here, totally at ease. They're listening to a local crofter, Ronnie Campbell, who's telling them stories of his time on the croft, shinty stories, an amazing man, very twinkly eyes, 82, and still keeps his sheep and really fit. But these 2 teachers were completely at ease with what was going on. If people had come in on that day and wanted to work out who the teachers were, they wouldn't have known. There were a group of adults there were the teachers there, the children there, and everybody was just together in a group, learning together. There was no rigid control. The children at one point disappeared down into the woodland. Teachers didn't go after them. It's very midgy and boggy down there, so they were down there for about 2 minutes and then they came back up. But I think that when we're looking at the sorts of teachers that we want, these teachers, one local and young and the other one a little bit older and not local, they represent what we would aspire to have, teachers who are facilitators of that quality of learning. And so next steps on the journey, how you can help. Today, just in the same way that we at the event at Badaguish had this group and all the expertise within this group in one place at one time, we'd like you to help with a task today. And we've got these documents now, all of these things. And in fact, local authorities have got their own outdoor learning strategies as well. This is a really excellent example from Dundee. So we have all these things in place, and we need to know what you think you need in order to take things forward, whether in a local authority or whether in an initial teacher education institution. What is it that you think is needed in order to take that next step? Some of the things that you'll be seeing today are examples of teachers' professional learning. I would say those teachers that I've been working with have been on a professional learning journey. So it's not just about twilight sessions or CPD that's organised, it's about all the different ways that you can learn as a teacher by working alongside others, including other teachers. So today, what we'd like you to do is to think about that, because Education Scotland have now got 12 officers in post who have a responsibility for outdoor learning. And there's a new officer, I think, just recently been appointed. And the Real World Learning Partnership have written and said, we're ready, we've got this expertise, there's lots of other people out there who really want to take this agenda forward. And we've had this very encouraging letter back. So I'm feeling very positive about what's happening in Scotland just now, and I'm about to pass over to Rosa Murray, who's going to tell us about what I think is the final piece in the jigsaw to do with professional standards for teachers. So I think that's me done, and I'd like to pass over to Rosa now. Thank you very much.